grateful to be here this morning. Just after a week of not meeting, we're just thankful that people are healthier and things are kind of getting back to normal. We ask now your blessing on this class. We do pray for wisdom as well, simply because Revelation chapter 9, as many have called it, is the weirdest chapter in the whole Bible. And so give us discernment, give us understanding, give us imagination, because the things that we're going to talk about are almost beyond our imagination. Something out of a, $100 million blockbuster summer movie almost, and even that would probably not even be in budget for them to do what the things we're going to talk about this morning. So give us grace and understanding, and praise in Jesus' name, amen. All right. So, I am curious, how many of you, we had very few people show up for the last time we met. We did have 59 views on YouTube, so it tells me some people watched it, but who has not watched last week or didn't show up last week? Oh boy, you're going to be really lost, I'm sorry. Because we're in the middle of the trumpet judgments. But that's okay. This will be so weird that you'll be like, okay, I missed something. I got to go back and do that. So hopefully you'll go back and watch those. But as we jump in this morning, really where I'd like to start in a lot of ways is to read a little bit from Jeremiah chapter 30. That may seem weird, but as we finished up last week, we saw some of the most horrible things in all of Scripture that we read last week. And what we're going to read today is actually far worse, believe it or not. And so I want you to realize that these things that we're talking about is not anything new where God suddenly changed programs sometimes at the end time, but these are things that have been prophesied all the way back in the Old Testament through the prophets. And I just kind of want us to see what Jeremiah wrote about this to kind of put some perspective here. So Jeremiah is writing about, basically the people of Israel being carried off and eventually coming back to the promised land. And so in verse 1 he says, "The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, write in a book all the words that I have spoken to you. For behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will restore the fortunes of my people, Israel and Judah, says the Lord, and I will bring them back to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall take possession of it." So the interesting thing about that is, at first glance, you might read that and you think, oh, well, that already happened. That was fulfilled, right? God brought people back, and then we had Hanukkah, and then 400 years later, Jesus was born, right? Well, unfortunately, though, when the tribe of Judah came back from Babylon, Israel was not with them. So this has never been fulfilled. Israel has never come back to the land. It was only Judah that came back. Now, there might be some stragglers here and there from Israel and stuff like that, but they were scattered off and were never brought back. Verse 4, "These are the words that the Lord spoke concerning Israel and Judah. Thus says the Lord, we have heard a cry of panic, of terror, and no peace. And now," and so think about that for a moment. When they were in captivity in Babylon, they actually had it pretty good. I mean, God was telling them, hey, get married, start businesses, have children, make a life here. You're going to be here, I can't remember, it's like 70 to 90 years, something like that. And then we're going to take you back to Babylon, or to Jerusalem and Judah. And so there is no terror during that time, other than maybe some of the things that happened during Esther's time, but that was averted. But see how it keeps going. It doubles down on this terror and panic. "Ask now and see, can a man bear a child?" Don't ask that question today. "But can a man bear a child? Why then do I see every man with his hands on his stomach like a woman in labor? Why has every face turned pale?" Okay, so one thing we need to realize is in the Old Testament, oftentimes great trouble, great pain, great suffering is basically used to be described in comparison to a woman going into labor, right? So you go all the way back to Genesis. That's a curse, right, that was given to the woman from a result of sin. And so, ladies, I've never given birth, but I hear it's very painful, right? And especially think back then, there's no drugs, right? Think how painful it was then. And there was a high mortality rate for your child and for the mother at the same time too, because you didn't have any of the modern things that we have today. And then there's all the pain leading up to it. In fact, even Jesus' own words is talking about when the tribulation comes, these will be like birth pains, right? Because it's painful. But here's saying, listen, every man even will be experiencing this. It'll be like they have their hands on their stomach experiencing the pains of labor. In other words, things are going to be really, really bad when this happens, where everybody's going to be experiencing this. Every face turned pale. Alas, that day is so great, there is none like it. It is a time of distress for Jacob, yet he shall be saved out of it. So maybe you've heard the terminology, the day of Jacob's trouble. That's what this comes from. This is just a modern translation, so it's not quite put that way. But if you're KJV affluent, I think it's the day of Jacob's trouble. And so the day of Jacob's trouble is also called the great day of the Lord, the wrath of the Lamb, the wrath of God, the tribulation. So this is a prophecy about what we're reading in Revelation, of what's going to happen. So, and it's very interesting. Remember last week we talked about the 144,000 Jews that were sealed. We're going to see in Revelation 9 that there's going to be a trumpet judgment, and it's going to say, listen, the only people who are going to be spared from it are the 144,000. Which is interesting. I mean, it goes along with what the prophets say. So I'm trying to build a connection to you from Revelation, because sometimes we just look at that and say, oh, this is its own thing, it's all new stuff. But it's deeply found, its roots in the Old Testament. A lot of these things have already been prophesied. Revelation is just a lot more detail on some of these items. So, let's see. Let's keep going here a little bit. And it shall come to pass on that day, declares the Lord of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off your neck, and I will burst your bonds, and foreigners shall no more make a servant of him, but they shall serve the Lord their God, and David their king, who I shall raise up for them. Who does that sound like? Sounds like Jesus Christ, right? So, do Jews today, does the nation of Israel today acknowledge Jesus Christ as their king?
No.
Absolutely not. These things have not taken place. So these are all future things. And we could go on and read in Jeremiah 30 and we'd see more and more things that'd be just like, oh wow, that clicks. Oh, that makes sense. But we won't take all that time because this is Revelation, not Jeremiah class. Maybe we'll do a Jeremiah class someday in the future.
As clear as you teachers that teach this, and we see Christ in the Old Testament so plain, how is it they do they purposely suppress it, or do they just?
Well, read Romans. Romans says that the natural man suppresses it.
Yes.
You know, what's plain to them is they clearly see all creation points to the fact that God is creator, and yet our sin, we use it to excuse ourselves or we deny God. And then you even get into Romans 9, 10, and 11, where Paul starts talking about Israel, where he wishes that he could die for his own nation of Israel, like he would lose his salvation for them, essentially. And it talks about the time of Gentiles must be fulfilled until God goes back to working with Israel.
But how is it though they ignore, or not ignore, how can they not see it plain as you teach it? The Jews, that Christ.
Same reason nobody can.
Okay.
You can share the gospel with somebody who's not even Jewish hundreds of times.
Okay.
And they could explain it to you back and everything, but it doesn't mean they believe it.
Okay.
So there's a blinding, essentially, that happens. So, good question. All right, so we're in Revelation. To recap from last week, what we looked at was something so terrible. So Anne Graham Lotz, a theologian, said this: the greatest threat to our environment is not fluorocarbon or nuclear testing or the burning of tropical forests in the Amazon River region or toxic waste. The greatest threat to our environment has been and is sin. We looked at last week, and the things that we looked at in those first 4 trumpet judgments basically wreaked havoc and destroyed the world's economy and ecology. So if you think about this in a lot of ways, a lot of the things that most people today are afraid of is the economy crashing, global warming, right? Climate change and things like that. Or meteorites crashing into the planet, these global disaster type things that they're just absolutely scared of. And we saw that all those worst case scenarios come true in the first 4 trumpet judgments. Okay? So beyond that, what else are people afraid of? What's worst case scenario? What do people expect will happen someday? War, okay. So, nuclear war was kind of covered last week a little bit, but war, we're going to see this week a little bit, and war is going to be constant from this point on in Revelation. But what else?
Disease.
We saw disease last week too. Good. What about an alien invasion? Oh, don't laugh.
I know.
They've been talking about that on the news.
What if I told you Revelation 9 is an alien invasion? Start throwing things at me now. Hear me out, okay? We often think alien as some extraterrestrial, ET, robots from far-fledged. But what if what we think our humanity thinks is aliens is not just the supernatural realm?
Wait, say that again.
The supernatural realm. Angels, demons, fallen angels, all sorts of things. What we're going to see in Revelation 9 is basically, for lack of better words, hell on earth. It is a demonic invasion, is where we're going with this. On a scale that has never been seen before, other than maybe before the flood. So that's where we're going this morning. And then you're like, how did he get that? There's no word demon in here. Just bear with me. We'll get there. Revelation 9, 1 through 3. So we're in the middle of the trumpet judgments. An angel is blowing a trumpet and judgment is taking place. So we're on trumpet number 5. Then the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven, which had fallen to the earth, and the key of the bottomless pit was given to him. So we should not take this as like a star, like the sun crashing into the earth or something like that. It's calling it a hymn. Stars are often referred to as some kind of angelic being, and we should probably view it that way. He, the star that had fallen to earth, opened the bottomless pit, and smoke went up and out of the pit, like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the pit. Then out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given to them as the scorpions of the earth have power. Okay. So, let's talk about this. We need to have some theological understanding and some framework of what's happening here. And then we also need to realize that our English translation is not very helpful here with one word specifically, and that's this idea of bottomless pit. Bottomless pit should probably be translated the abyss, as we'll see here. So I want to walk through this a little bit to help you understand what is sometimes referred to as the underworld, or sometimes as what you probably refer to as Sheol or Hades. Okay? We need to have some understanding here. So you have the term Hades. Hades is the place where the dead go. So when somebody dies, they go to Hades. Hades in the Old Testament is called Sheol. Sheol is a common word. David says it a lot. It's in the Psalms a lot. The Proverbs says it a lot. Sometimes it's translated in English just as the grave, but that's Sheol. And if you had a Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, they would put where Sheol is, it would be Hades. Okay? Then you have what's called Gehenna. Okay? Gehenna is the place that Jesus would talk about. It is commonly referred to, as we'll see later on in Revelation, as the lake of fire. Okay? The lake of fire is the final judgment. Sometimes we refer to that as hell. Okay? The problem is with our English translations is sometimes we put hell in when it's actually Hades, or when it's actually one of these other words that we're going to see here in a moment. And it really makes it confusing for an English reader. But if you have the Greek and you put it all out, you see these are clearly different things that the Bible's talking about. Then you have Tartarus. Okay? Tartarus is a prison for angels who have sinned. Okay? So, let's explore that idea for a moment.
Yeah.
So 2 Peter 2:4. Peter writes this, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment." Okay? "If he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness." So Peter's building a case for actually when Christ will come back. And because people are accusing, basically God of not punishing sin. He's like, no, God punished sin. He's laying out this list. He punished these angels. He punished the people in the day of Noah's time and so forth. But here, see what I'm talking about? It uses the word hell there.
Ah, I like that.
And then, see, it's the Tartarus is what this is. And so other places they'll use the word hell, but it's a totally different Greek word, but has absolutely a completely different meaning. So there is a place called Tartarus where some angels that have sinned have been basically bound up and chained until the time of judgment. Now think about this for a moment. Many would say, and even Dr. Mark Hitchcock, who did this, would say that these angels are basically the sons of God spoken about in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. If you took my angelology class, we covered this in depth. And so that would be what happened to those particular angels or sons of God that sinned. You have to remember, okay, for those of you who aren't aware of that, in the Old Testament is very specific about the different types of supernatural spirit beings. When you get to the New Testament, everything's an angel, which makes things very confusing because not everything's an angel. There's angels, there's chief princes, there's powers, there's principalities, there's thrones, there's demons, there's fallen angels, there's cherubim, and so forth. But it gets very confusing in the New Testament. And that's just how the Greek language worked. That's no one's fault. And then even Jude mentions this, but he doesn't use the word Tartarus here. But I want you to see that there's the same concept and idea. Jude talks about this. "And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day." So you can see how he doesn't use that word Tartarus, the location of where they're at, but you can see it's the same concept of what he's talking about, chains and gloomy darkness and so forth. And so there are angels who have been imprisoned there until the day of judgment. Well, what is Revelation? It's the day of judgment, right? So many have pointed out that what is happening here is that when you see these angels in Revelation, some are holy, they are loyal angels. Some are rebellious angels, okay? The word fallen angel is a human term. That's not a biblical term. We need to realize that. There is, and we'll see why when we get to Revelation 12 in a couple weeks. But, and so, let's see. We won't go back to Genesis 6. Well, yeah, let's go back there. Just for that a few people who don't know what I'm talking about. We didn't take angelology. In Genesis 6:4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men were of old, the men of renown. And so, if you look at how basically Jude and Peter put everything, it fits this time period before the flood. And so this would be what that is. And so the sons of God are angels, and the daughters of men are human women, obviously. So there is that idea. Let's see here. Then you have a fourth place, okay? And this is called the abyss. And this is our bottomless pit here in Revelation. The abyss is also spoken about in other places. Like the abyss is mentioned like 9 times in the New Testament. Let's go look at the first mention. Jesus actually talks about the abyss. He doesn't actually talk about it, but somebody does that he's talking to. So then they sailed to the country. I've never really thought to read the word out loud before. Gerasenes? Sure. Which is the opposite Galilee. When Jesus had stepped out on land, there met a man from the city who had demons. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he had not lived in a house, but among the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice. So these are the demons speaking, not the man. This is the key thing to think about. What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? This is very interesting because the Most High God is basically the title of Yahweh in the Old Testament. It's very rarely ever used in the New Testament. In fact, the only other place we see it is in Revelation. Something to think about. I beg you, do not torment me. For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many a time it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. So isn't that interesting? I mean, the demon is giving this guy abilities that are not normal. He is breaking shackles and chains. He has superhuman strength. And it seems like the demon, it has control of him, right? This is what demon possession looks like. There's a certain amount of craze to it at the same time. Jesus then asked him, what is your name? And he said, Legion, for many demons had entered him. So he has, Legion is typically like 1,000. Now, whatever that means, doesn't mean there's necessarily 1,000 demons, but there's a lot of demons inside of him, is kind of the idea. For many demons had entered him, and they begged him not to command them to depart into where?
The abyss.
The abyss. Okay? Which is the bottomless pit, as we'll see here. Now look what he does. Jesus grants their request, which is just weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. So I have questions about this, so I'm just going to explore those questions with you for a moment. When Jesus would depossess, cast out, whatever you want to call it, did the other demons go to the abyss? I think that implies that there's a good chance, yes, that's where they're being banished to. But suddenly we have this idea that there's a real fear that demons have of being cast into the abyss. And so I think what we can start to deduce from this is that what is in the abyss? Demons. Okay, what is a demon? We need to clarify that here for a moment, so we're all on the same page.
Isn't it the child of the Nephilim and sons of men?
It is. So in the Old Testament, if you trace this idea of a Nephilim, when they die, because they're half angel, half human, they become a Rephaim. And Rephaim are disembodied spirits of these halflings, whatever you want to call it. I try not to say halfling, because you think Lord of the Rings, you think these little people, but they're actually giants. They're really big. Okay? So notice, angels go to Tartarus, demons go to the abyss. Okay? So a fallen angel is not a demon. They're two different things. In fact, if you actually trace it all throughout the New and Old Testament, you will clearly see that demons and fallen angels are two completely separate things.
So we're questioning if when they drown, you say, so basically they die.
The pigs die.
The pigs die. So basically, gave no place for the demons to possess. If they don't go to the abyss, where would they go?
They are just floating around.
Okay.
So as we talked about in angelology, I said I think that's what ghosts are.
Yeah.
So not dead humans, but dead whatever these you want to call these things, right, fam? Okay. So we have abyss here, and if you kind of go back, this bottomless pit is abyss, and so we kind of have this link here of this idea. So 4 places. Abyss is, it's just a Greek word. It's an immensely deep space. It's a transcendent place associated with the dead and hostile powers. Even in Greek mythology, the abyss was associated with that. And so for the Hebrew people to adopt this word from Greek to translate into like their understanding would make sense. Excuse me. Here's an artist's rendition of it. I mean, it's just for fun. I mean, obviously, we have no idea what it looks like, but it's just like a dark pit type thing. All right, so if that was really confusing for all of you, I put this chart together. It's not in your books. This is what we're saying Sheol looks like. This is what the grave looks like. In Hades is a location. It's a spiritual location. Okay, it's a real place that you can go to. If you were only spirit and not human, you could, it's a place in the spiritual realm. In there, in Sheol, you have Gehenna, the lake of fire, where everything will eventually be cast into that does not make it into the new heaven and new earth. You have Tartarus, where certain angels are imprisoned in gloomy chains until the day of judgment. And then you have the abyss, the bottomless pit, also located in this place. That's the idea.
Question.
Yeah.
In Revelation, when it talks about the four angels who are holding back the Euphrates.
Where we're going next, yep.
Okay, well, okay. Okay, you'll tell us where you think they are. Okay.
Yeah. We're getting there. You're getting ahead of ourselves. We got to deal with the fifth trumpet, then we'll get to the sixth one, okay? So that's that idea. If you've never heard this, never seen this, and you just think there's heaven and hell, that is not correct. That's from our English translations translating everything the same, but it's actually way more complex than that.
And then Abraham's bosom.
Abraham's bosom was a place in Sheol as well, which is no longer there.
Yes, I know. Once Christ died, he went down and set the captives free. So it was part of Sheol, but it wasn't that. It was like I know there was a
Great.
Divide. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Jesus talks about it. He has the parable of, was it Lazarus and the rich man?
Yes.
And Lazarus goes to Abraham's bosom and the rich man goes to basically a not so great place, which actually you could say there's actually another place in there, but I'm not trying to make a detailed map of Hades, sorry. Which I don't think we could, because there could be even more places we don't know about. But, there is that idea. But for right now, the way it looks in Revelation, those are the clear places that we know about that Revelation talks about. Gehenna, Tartarus, and the abyss.
So as far as physical location of
Where it's at?
Hades,
Well, see, that's a poor question, because the physical location, there's no physical location, right? It's a spiritual location in the spirit realm. But you're asking, like, where might it be? Like, in the physical plane of where we are, could you travel to that intersection?
if you think about how Israelites, at least at the beginning, conceive how the world was made, So you have heaven, and the other place, other components, and the underworld where Sheol will be.
Yeah. Most think, from an Old Testament standpoint, and we don't know for sure, but if you kind of read through the text where you talk about, Jesus ascends, right, in Acts chapter 1, and then in Revelation 19, we'll see he descends. Most would think that the spiritual place that we often call heaven, where the throne room of God is, and the angelic realm is, where most of them hang out, is up somewhere, right?
Well, and remember from angelology, I think there's a section that Heiser mentions, as the gates of hell, that is located in, Israel.
Caesarea Philippi?
Yeah, so that's what I'm going.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and so then many would say the underworld, which is oftentimes a term that is used, even in the Old Testament, would be where all this. So it's underground. So I know that's hard to think about. So if you were to dig into the ground, we just see the physical mass, right? Mm-hmm. Well, in the spiritual realm, they don't have the physical impediment. So you could have an entire location in the spiritual realm on top of that without having any kind of impediments. I know that sounds really weird, but I wish I have a video that demonstrates it, but I don't have it. So we're getting way off topic. But this is interesting. People might find this stuff interesting. And I think to understand these things, it really helps you understand the verses that talk about these things, because otherwise it's just like, you just don't really kind of get the same nuance that Jesus or the apostles are talking about, or even in the Old Testament. So as we go back to Revelation, we see here there's this bottomless pit. Out of this pit comes these locusts upon the earth. Okay, so it actually calls them locusts. And they were given power as of scorpions of the earth have power. So they're not scorpions, they're locusts, so they're some kind of flying beast. And this power that they have is akin to that of a scorpion. And a scorpion obviously has its power where? In its tail, the sting. And did you know there's over 1,700 different species of scorpion? Some are poisonous, some will just sting and irritate you. In fact, I watched some YouTube videos just to kind of learn more about scorpions. And apparently down in like Phoenix, like it's a big deal. Like I watched this news story where a scorpion climbed into a child's diaper and started just stinging again and again and again. The baby's foaming at the mouth. And so just terrible. I mean, scorpions are a big deal. We don't have scorpions here though, so we don't often think about that. Has anyone lived where there's scorpions before? Yeah?
Stung 3 times.
You've been stung 3 times. Okay, so you know what that's like a little bit. Were they poisonous or just kind of the irritating?
No, but like the whole arm fell asleep.
Yeah.
When
Yeah, and apparently it has something to do with some proteins that get injected in the body and the way our body interacts with their proteins, and it's just, yeah. But so for there to, that's just it's something to think about, chew on a little bit there. So here's the interesting things about this, though, okay? They were told not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree. Okay, so just stop right there. What's weird about that if they're locusts?
that's what I normally do.
That's what locusts eat. And they're told to ignore that stuff, right? But only the men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. So that would be the 144,000 we read about last week. The 144,000, 12,000 from each tribe of Israel. Okay? And look at this. It gets weirder. And they were not permitted to kill anyone, but only to torment for 5 months. So the 5-month thing is weird because, do you know, you may not realize this, but usually a locust swarm or whatever you call it lasts for about 5 months. So for John to call them locusts seems appropriate.
So basically, they do have the ability to kill if they wanted to, it seems, because they were not permitted to. So maybe if they stung you enough, they would be able to kill you.
No, it gets weirder.
Oh.
I told you this is the weirdest chapter, and one of the weirdest. And in those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, and death flees from them. So, what does that look like? Like, that's just weird. We'll explore this here in a little more in a moment. I'm gonna propose my hypothesis of what I think this is in a little bit, but let's explore this a little bit more. So to kind of go along with what Daniel said earlier, so imagine here's the earth, right? The earth is under judgment, and you know when we saw the seal judgments at first, a lot of those had to do with seemed to be humanity's own issues that they were creating, right? It was man's just natural course of events and the way choices that mankind has made, and it reaps judgment upon them. But now then the seal judgments seem to be, the first 4 seem to be directly the judgment coming directly from heaven, from Jesus, the Lamb, because it even calls it, who can stand against the wrath of the Lamb? Remember that? Well, now these what are called the woes, these last 3, seem to actually be hell's judgment. Now, when I say hell's judgment, I don't want you to think, oh, this is Satan doing things, because we do not have Satan anywhere in this picture. We'll find out later. He's doing something completely different. Okay, this is a different program where some of the locked up angels and demons that we have seen are now being unleashed upon the world to wreak their havoc.
At God's
At
command.
totally God's command, God's in control, and His sovereignty, and we'll see that emphasized here as we look at this and we go on. So imagine this. This is where we're at in Revelation in these seal judgments. Humanity's own judgment against themselves, the wrath of the Lamb, and then the armies of hell being unleashed. Well, I know, this is weird. I mean, I told you we were going to get even darker and weirder than we did last week. So Charles Ryrie, I don't know if any of you know him, but he's used to be pretty famous, but he's gone to be with the Lord now. Ryrie Study Bible, stuff like that. This was his thought on it, and I'm actually going to disagree with him here in a moment. But I wanted to share this idea for you. When he read the not being able to die thing, this is what he thought of. The effect of this torment is to drive people to suicide, but they will not be able to die. Although they will prefer death to the agony of living, death will not be possible. Bodies will not sink and drown. Poisons and pills will have no effect, and somehow even bullets and knives will not do their intended job. Okay? This is how he's understanding it. And I've heard a lot of people say this, and that's the idea. Like, you'll be able to do whatever you want, and you won't be able to die. But that just seems weird to me, doesn't it to you?
Make practical sense.
There's no logic to it, basically, is where I'm going with it. And so, and even this, he has some assumptions he's thrusting onto the text, which I don't even know where he gets it from. It just, because if we go back, and in those days men will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, and death flees from them. Well, maybe, but can you imagine a scenario where you could somehow maybe take a knife and stab yourself in the heart and still survive? That makes no sense whatsoever at all. Something supernatural has to be going on. So I'm going to propose a different view here. So as we move on, we talk about this. The appearance of the locust was like horses prepared for battle. So I don't take that to mean like they look like horses. I take that to mean, you imagine an army of horses all lined up. I mean, it's a mass amount of these locusts coming on. And on their heads appeared to be crowns like gold. I don't think that's actual crowns necessarily, but I think there seems to be some kind of symbol or glowing or something that light that they're producing. I don't know. And their faces were like the faces of men. In other words, you could tell them apart. You see individuals, and I look out here and I see all of you, and you're all very distinctly different.
So is it like an army that has people captive, not allowing them to access things that they would use to die, basically?
Maybe. Well, you're on a closer track than I think Ryrie is.
Because you have to be like some way of captivity, not to be able to kill yourself.
Yep, that's where I'm going with it. I'll pull it together here in a moment. So look what else it says. They had hair like the hair of women, and their teeth were like the teeth of lions. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots, of many horses rushing to battle. They have tails like scorpions and stings, and in their tails is their power to hurt men for 5 months. So I think these really are little creatures, some type of locust-looking thing that flies around, has the ability to sting and cause pain. But look at this. They have a king over them. The angel of the abyss. His name is Hebrew. Or his name in Hebrew is Abaddon. And in the Greek, he has the name Apollyon. Okay? So I want to point this out for a moment, because some of you might say, hey, earlier I had said that there's nothing called a fallen angel in Scripture. And that's true. But if this angel is from the abyss and was imprisoned, would you say that this is a good angel or a bad angel? Okay, but there's no distinction. Angel is just an angel at this point. Okay? We're not going to go any further with that for a moment, but hold on to that until next week.
But it does say angel of the abyss, so it is a distinction.
Yeah, well, of where he came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, he came from the abyss.
Yeah.
Well, an angel can also mean messenger, so,
Oh, it's just a messenger. Yeah, it's a human messenger.
yeah.
No.
Okay.
No, but that's what I'm saying.
So let's pull this together for a moment. So let's see. The only other place where Abaddon is ever used is in Job. Did it go?
You typed in
You typed in
Job.
Job.
He only had one job. Look at this. Sheol, Hades, is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. That's the only other place it is. It's just talking about God's sovereignty and his ability to see everything. But here you have a person, for lack of a better word, who is identified being in Sheol, which is the grave or Hades, and has no covering before God. Now, the covering, you could say, hey, if he's in a dark abyss, even God sees him down in this empty, deep abyss type thing like we're talking about. So it does seem to be somebody, a real angel that is also imprisoned in Hades. So I would take that to be as some kind of angel that disobeyed God, and God said, okay, I'm not going to let you be able to reign free with your disobedience. You're going to be imprisoned. Kind of like the prison people in Tartarus, or the angels in Tartarus.
So if Satan's in the bottomless pit and locked in there,
Later, not now.
oh, he's not in the
He doesn't, not until Revelation 20. Revelation 21 through 3, Jesus comes, a strong angel comes, grabs Satan and throws him in the abyss for 1,000
Because
years.
Satan is possessing the
Antichrist?
Antichrist.
Maybe. We'll see. Yes,
Well,
I think
the
so,
verse
yes,
says
but we'll
they
get there.
Entered him.
Yep, we'll get there. I'm trying not to
Okay.
spill it all too soon. There's a lot of supernatural stuff to cover over the next couple of weeks. Okay. So we have this idea of this king. Okay, so here's my take on it of what I think is happening. Okay, you ready? This is my view. There's some other people who hold this view, but this is how I understand it. The trumpet blows, and a good angel is sent to unlock the abyss. Okay? These in the abyss are demons. Okay? These demons, because demons possess things, whether it be animals or humans, are possessing this group of locusts. And these locusts are descending upon mankind. Now, as these locusts are descending and they're attacking mankind, I believe they are actually stinging. But because the desire of a demon is to possess a human, what I think is happening is they're also, as they're stinging them, they are possessing humans. There is mass demon possession on a level even far beyond what was in Jesus' day. And so when you get to that really weird verse where it says that they want to die but they can't, it's because they are prisoners in their own body where the demon has taken over and is doing all these atrocious things, and they want to die but they can't because they're not in control.
I see what you're saying.
See where I'm going with it?
Yeah.
Okay? See how that makes a lot more sense instead of trying to thrust this whole you can shoot yourself and stab yourself and poison yourself and not die? Okay? So that's my take on it. So
There's a lot of things that make sense in the Bible.
I said it's a weird
Do
chapter.
you dare bring up the word zombie?
Yeah, that's not.
I wouldn't say zombie. I would just say demon possessed. I would say just like that man that Jesus went to,
Yeah.
who was in prison. I mean, he seems to be, but there's no indication that man had no idea what happened while he was demon possessed. He seems to be fully understanding because he wants to follow Jesus now, and Jesus is like, no, you need to go tell him about all the things that have happened, how I freed you from this, and what you used to be like, and what you're doing now, and be a testimony for me in this area.
And then wasn't he cutting himself too?
Yeah,
So
it says
so
it.
he may have been trying to
Kill
release
himself.
Yeah.
the demon out of him or whatever, and
Yeah.
doing whatever he could,
Yep, possible.
which would be what those that have been stung. They want to get rid of the demon, but they can't.
Yeah, if you read the church fathers, like 100 years after, they talk about demon possession. They talk about these people who are trying to throw themselves in the fires and all this kind of stuff, but they can't get full control to do it, and it's all this weird stuff. So, yeah, quite
Chris,
possible.
I don't know if anyone has written about this, but so as all these things, are happening at that time, how do you think about just the running of like government and the normal things that happen day to day for societies to function? I know that it would be very weird, like how societies are functioning, between all these things or within all these things happening. But how do you have, like, for example, governments running when everyone is being, like, demon possessed, and like, has anyone written about this? Like, because your theory about like they being possession as they get stung and all that, like, will clearly have an impact on how the world is being run.
Well, not only this, but we talked about it last week. Val asked a great question, and I explored that for an idea. And I said, look at the first 4 trumpet judgments. The economy's destroyed. Half the world's population is killed. 3.5 billion people die like that in those first 4 trumpet judgments. What has that done to the world's governments? I don't think the world at this point is anything like we have it. Like it's beyond our imagination. I think it's more akin to the Dark Ages, like you read about, like in Europe and stuff like that at this point, and far worse. Where I don't think you have cell towers that are still standing after everything that's happened. So I don't think cell phones are a thing if it happens in the near future, is what I'm saying. I don't think you have broadcast television. I don't think you're looking forward to the next Marvel movie. What I'm saying is, you read like the Left Behind series, and I said, remember, that's fiction. I said, don't view it that way, because I don't think they go far enough. Like, I think they they just make it seem like, well, there's the normal world kind of going on, and there's some minor inconveniences that happen here and there type thing. I think there's mass destruction.
So there's no conception of like a controlling government or country that is like kind of like running the show
I think there's still some governments. I don't think it's total absolute chaos, but as we're going to see, this is all paving the way for the Antichrist to come on the scene.
Okay.
Because when I read that chapter, to me it seems like a description of an army, you know,
Sure.
that
It's
is
really
being led by, you know, Abaddon. But at least in my mind is, okay, Abaddon can,
Perfection.
well, I don't, he's an angel, so I don't know if he can possess actually, you know, like a demon does, but like using someone in a position of power to create a situation of captivity in the world where, you know, there's so much control that people cannot die or.
Yeah, well, I mean, because that'd be the Antichrist later on that does those things. So if you're trying to, your theory would state that this happens multiple times in the 7-year period. But I don't think there's anything in the text that would come close to indicating that or support that. We're going to finish Revelation 9 here in a moment, and we are going to see an army, but that's the next trumpet judgment. So.
Chris, is this happening to the entire world over at the same time?
It seems to be, because a lot of these things, you know, you get some commentary that says in the entire world and all over a lot of these things don't seem to be localized. They seem to be very global.
So one more thing, Chris.
Yeah.
So as God is recovering the nations and all this, you know, the concept of globalization should also be kind of fading, right?
No, it actually intensifies later on in Revelation.
As I was gonna say, like, just to support my theory, I guess, you know, like if globalization starts to fade as God is recovering the nations and all that.
Yeah.
You can think about like people actually getting to just like one place on the earth, you know, where control will be easier and things like.
Well, sure, less people, easier control, right?
Yeah.
And we've already seen that. So let's say when the end times happen, there's 7 billion people like there is today. Well, where we're at right now, we've already seen 3.5 billion people die. So we only have half of what we currently have in this moment. And then as we're going to see in the 6th trumpet, a lot more people are going to die suddenly. So it's just going to keep getting less and less and less. How many people? So, yeah. Good thoughts. All right, so let's do the 6th trumpet here. So that was the 5th trumpet. Now we're moving into the 6th trumpet. The 6th trumpet, then the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God. One saying to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, "Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates," like Dave was mentioning earlier. So you have 4 angels at the river Euphrates, and they're bound there. And the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released so that they would kill a third of mankind. So think about that. We've already had 3.5 billion people die. There's 3.5 billion people alive, and 1/3 of that 3.5 billion are going to die in the 6th trumpet. So we're getting less and less. So the river Euphrates is a real place. That you can see kind of runs right through there. It runs next to where Babylon is, which is rather interesting because as we get into the second half of Revelation, Babylon is going to be a big deal. The Antichrist, a big deal, and a lot of these things. And so we're narrowing in on where a lot of these events, these last events, will happen. Oh, yep, there's Babylon. So the 6th trumpet, the number of the armies of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them. And this is how I saw in the vision the horses and those who sat on them. The riders had breastplates, the color of fire and hyacinth and of brimstone. And then the heads of the horses are like the heads of lions. And out of their mouths proceed fire and smoke and brimstone. A third of mankind was killed by these 3 plagues, by the fire and the smoke and the brimstone, which proceeded out of their mouths. So the interesting, notice what they're killed by. They're killed by the smoke, the brimstone, and the fire. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails. For their tails are like serpents and have heads, and with them they do harm. So, we have some things we need to identify here. What's the identity of this 200 million army? And is the army human or is it demonic? So if the idea is that in the fifth trumpet, it's a demonic, creatures that are released on the world, we never saw anything at the end of the fifth trumpet. We just know they're able to do what they're doing at that moment for 5 months, but it never says they just disappear. They're still on Earth somehow, right?
Maybe it's a new technology Apache helicopter.
That is what a lot of people like to say,
I know.
especially if you follow prophecy in the late 20th century.
I'm being ornery.
But it doesn't seem to be, though. That's the thing. This all seems to be very supernatural with the viewing of angels and all that type of stuff. And some would say it would describe human warfare, right? But it also could be some kind of demonic warfare. We already have a precedent for spiritual armies, because if you go back in the Old Testament and you see Elijah and Elisha, right? And his eyes are opened, and he's able to see the armies of heaven surrounding them to protect them. Well, why would it be so hard to think that there couldn't be armies from the underworld of darkness that could also have armies? Because we're building to something. In Revelation 12, war breaks out in heaven between Satan and God, essentially, and Jesus and their armies. And so there's very much precedent to have a supernatural demonic army here, because they're going to take their war from earth to heaven in a couple chapters. So many, to explore Jim's idea, back in 1965, Time magazine wrote up, to back up Lowe's bluster, Red China passed the word that its 200 million man and woman militia had gone into serious training. So many have said, well, this is China. And this is a 200 million man and woman strong army that can march on the world. Can they field that? Sure. They have a population of 1 billion people as of right now. I'm sure they could muster up a 200 million person army. If you want to take all the supernatural out of this and assume that this is just human army. So that would be possible. In Revelation 6:12, the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river, the Euphrates, and its water was dried up so that the way would be prepared for the kings from the east. And this is also why some people would say this is China. Okay? You dry up the Euphrates River and they're able to walk across. Now think about this. Why don't they just fly in and parachute in? Why don't they just take boats? Well, I don't think those things are around anymore. I think the world is so in complete disarray that I don't think we have modern technology anymore. At least not in mass scale to transport anything. So someone would say, like, what that's describing here is tanks, Apache helicopters, cannons, and John is trying to describe them, and since he's never seen anything that would even come close to looking like this, he's describing them in the terms of what he's familiar with, is what some would say. So that is a possibility. So we've already talked about the population a little bit. So you have 100% of the population, whatever it happens to be when the end times come. I like to use today's population because it makes it more real. 7 billion people. And we see here, you divide it in 25%. This is the fourth seal judgment, which we talked about 2 weeks ago. The sixth trumpet does 33%, which is half. Oh, I think I had my math off a little bit. But still, though, that's no small number to consider. 50% death rate of the world. And we're going to see it continue on. So the question is it a human army or a demonic army? I don't know. I think it's perfectly set up for both. I think it's possible it could be a human army here. But the fact that when we kind of go back here, and it talks about these 4 angels being released from the Euphrates, what do the angels have to do with a 200 million man army? Like, do they somehow take control of it? Someone asked the question, do they go into China and possess key military leaders and march them in? I suppose those things are all possible, but we don't have those details. So I am going to say, is it human army or demonic army? And I'm going to use a popular meme, and I'm going to say, why not both? You already have these demons released on the earth. You have angels being in power. Why can't it be a mixture of both?
Well, because it seems like the riders looked human, but the horses seem to have demonic or supernatural powers. So it could be like you say, a combination of both. The color of fire. So the riders, I mean, and then you look at the heads of the horses are like the heads of lions. Well, that would be different than what we're used to seeing for horses.
Yeah, I mean, there's something definitely weird about it. So,
I was thinking, since it points to the east, these things coming from the east and attacking, I guess, or perturbing the rest of the world, basically. To your point of the world looks so much different, and there's no maybe modern technology and all that. Like, it's hard for me to think that, as you mentioned before, like globalization even like expands or intensifies when there's no modern technology, because that's really what has created, the trends in the East to be so current in the West, and maybe the opposite. Where in my mind is like the combination of demonic, human, interaction, plus what we have today in terms of modern technology is still potentially in place to a certain degree. That creates this impact across the whole world, and also just pointing back to angelology, like if you think about the beginning where God alerted the nations and all that to these powers, these angelic beings, there was always a combination of like both working together, right? So that's maybe where I think that it's more like not only demonic but also like human.
Yeah, that's right. You're exactly right. That's kind of how I said, why not both? Like, because you have that precedent in the Old Testament where demons and humans are working together. Yeah, good thought. Yeah, we'll talk more about globalization because we have to get to Babylon and the Antichrist. That I think will help with that. And we'll see there's never a total one world nation that survives in the way some would think. All right, let's wrap up this chapter. It ends this way. The rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands. And this is why I also think that this is very demonic in this whole chapter. Because look at what it adds now about the people who survive through this trumpet judgment. They're worshiping demons. How many people do you know who worship demons today? Right? Most people are humanists. There is no demons. There are no angels. There's no God. There's no Jesus, all that type of stuff. So something has happened to flip the entire world's view and say, oh, we want to worship these demons. We want to be a part of them. We want to work with them and stuff like that. And the idols of gold and of silver and of brass and of stone and of wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. And they did not repent of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their immorality, nor of their thefts. So we are in session 14, Revelation. This is titled A Strong Angel with a Little Scroll. This will not be nearly as weird. In fact, this will hopefully maybe be a little encouraging because we come off of Revelation 9 and it seems like there's literal chaos happening, or as some would say, hell on earth. And so we're going to see God's sovereignty re-emphasized here, just so you realize that this is God who's in control of all this. Chapter 10 focuses on two main ideas: the sovereignty of God, and then the idea of the scriptures. And we have two interpretive issues we need to deal with. We're going to see this little book or this little scroll, and we have to deal with the idea of what is the little book. And also, who is the strong angel that we're going to see here that carries it? So let's see. Revelation 10:1. I saw another strong angel coming down out of heaven, clothed with a cloud, and the rainbow was upon his head, and his face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little book, which was open. He placed his right foot on the sea, and his left on the land. And he cried out with a loud voice, as when a lion roars. And when he had cried out, the seven peals of thunder uttered their voices. So we have another set of seven here. that we're going to introduce. And unfortunately, there's not a lot to say about it. And I'll give some commentary on why I think that is based on what I shared with Revelation 9 here a little bit. But so some have seen this strong angel, and some have said this is Jesus Christ. Because they say, listen, he's holding a scroll. And so the last person we saw holding a scroll was Jesus, right? He took it from the hand of Yahweh, God the Father. And then you see some of the description here, and it seems to match the description of Jesus in Revelation 1. And so some have said, hey, this is Jesus Christ. I don't think that is, and here's the reason why. It's in the terminology. I saw another strong angel. And so this word another is alos in Greek, and this refers sounds like, looks like it's misspelled. Yeah, I didn't type this. This is from Dr. Mark Hitchcock. I'd just like to point that out. So you can apparently have multiple PhDs and still misspell words. This refers to another of the same kind. In this case, it refers to another angel like the angels in chapter 8 and 9. The way the Greek word is used, it cannot be Jesus because it's another of the same kind, and the only other that you would have at this point would be these strong angels that are coming with each trumpet. And so we should see this as one of the trumpet angels, not as Jesus Christ. Now it could be, well, we won't go down that route, but that's how we should understand it. Reason number 2 is why it shouldn't be is when Jesus is mentioned in Revelation, he is clearly identified, and there is no doubt who they're talking about. And here, there's all sorts of reasons why the doubt. There might be some similarities, but he's not clearly identified. We move on. When the 7 peals of thunder had spoken, I was about to write. So John's been being told to write these things as he goes along the whole time. Watch these things, participate in these things, write these things down. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, seal up the things which the 7 peals of thunder have spoken, and do not write them down. So this is one of the times where John is told, don't write anything down. We don't want anybody else to know these things, which is kind of weird. So here's kind of the idea. We have the 7 seals. We have the 7 trumpets. We're in the 6th trumpet, by the way. And then you have 7 bowls eventually that will happen. But then you seem to have this idea. You have 7 peals of thunder, which seem to take place between the trumpets and the bowls. Really, I think that line should probably be before the 7th trumpet there, but I think the reason why maybe he put it there is, as you've noticed, the 7th seal contains the 7 trumpets. The 7th trumpet contains the 7 bowls, as we're going to see. And so the peals of thunder is really just between the trumpets and bowls, essentially, because this is the last trumpet judgment. Then the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land lifted up his right hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever. And swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and things in it, and the earth and the things in it, and the sea and the things in it. And there will be delay no longer.
Well, we know who that is.
Oh, sure, yeah. And so we're going to see this theme where sometimes in Revelation, it points back to God being the creator of everything, right? Oftentimes I like to say the phrase, God is the creator, we are the creation, because it's a reminder of what our position is in the universe. And I think that's a very biblical way of understanding it, because even in Revelation, there's this constant reminder, God is the creator, and everything else underneath, even those demonic armies, angels, humanity, all of creation is the creation. And so everything serves God in some way, shape, or form, even when we are in outright rebellion. And he said with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heaven and the earth and sea and springs of water. This is in direct contrast to what we just read at the end of Revelation chapter 9, where it says, what were they worshiping?
The demons.
The demons. Revelation 10:7. But in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, so now he's referring to the future, what's going to happen next. The 7th angel is going to sound. When he is about to sound, then the mystery of God is finished, as he preached to his servants, the prophets. So we should understand that to be the Old Testament prophets. That's why I went to Jeremiah 30, to show you that, listen, these things are a fulfillment of what we see in the Old Testament prophets. Mystery is the same word here, mysterion. Mysterion means something that nobody saw coming, but is now revealed. So nobody even knew it was a possibility, and then boom, suddenly, oh wow, where'd this come from? The church is called a mystery.
Okay, I was gonna ask you.
Back in Ephesians chapter 3.
Yeah, Paul,
And it talks about it was hidden from even the angels
yeah.
who knew about it. So these things that are happening in these thunders, or I'm sorry, the thunder peals, sorry, are a mystery. So what God is happening is something that is not meant to be known by anybody, and that's one of the reasons why it's being sealed up. John's not supposed to write about it. My theory, here's my theory. I think things are so messed up in the world with the demonic armies that these peals of thunder will help to fix some of that so that we can continue on in the story of Revelation. But because they deal directly with the supernatural realm, we're not to know about them because it's the deal to fix with that. Because we're going to get to Revelation chapter 12 and we're going to see war break out in heaven as a result. So I think God's going to do something that's really going to royally tick some people off. And when I say people, I mean the evil supernatural realm. And it's going to be all out rebellion at that point.
I have to ask a question. So when you say when it says mystery of God is finished, so when Paul talks about he was given the mystery of God to reveal what the prophets didn't know,
Yeah.
so is this also a continuation of the same mystery?
No, well, maybe yes,
Okay.
maybe no. The mystery was that Christ had to die and that
Right.
the Gentiles would be saved, and then God would pull a people for himself out of all the nations of the world.
Well, he'd also live in them
Eventually.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened yet.
then.
And so then what this is, the mystery of God is finished, and this might be the culmination of writing everything.
Okay.
Potential. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. It's a mystery.
Yeah.
I don't know. Revelation 10:8. Then the voice which I heard from heaven, I heard again speaking with me, and saying, Go take the book which is open in the hand of the angel who stands on the sea and on the land. So the scroll, I don't believe, is the scroll that Jesus is holding. First of all, this isn't Jesus, this is an angel, as we talked about. It's another scroll. It's called a little scroll, so it's identified as something different. And then John's going to take the scroll. What does John have to do with the scroll? Remember, we talked about the scroll is the inheritance of the nations that Jesus is getting. Why does John need the inheritance? So he says, Go take the book which is opened in the hand of the angel who stands on the sea and on the land. So I went to the angel, telling him to give me the little book. And he said to me, Take it and eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Next time someone comes and asks me for a book, I'm going to say, Take it and eat it.
Some folks, it feels like you are. Read it.
It's good for you. Take it and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be sweet as honey.
Yeah.
I took the little book out of the angel's hand and I ate it. And in my mouth it was sweet as honey. And when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. So many have pointed out that this is a reenactment of what Ezekiel went through. So we go back to Ezekiel here. And Ezekiel, this is what happened to him. Then he said to me, Son of man, eat what you find, eat this scroll, and go. Speak to the house of Israel. Now notice, Son of Man is a title that's given to him, but it's not necessarily meaning Jesus here. So this is used a little bit differently. So I opened my mouth, and he fed me the scroll. And he said to me, Son of man, feed your stomach and fill your body with the scroll which I am giving you. Then I ate it, and it was sweet as honey in my mouth. Then he said to me, Son of man, go to the house of Israel and speak my words to them. For you are not being sent to a people of unintelligible speech or difficult language, but to the house of Israel. These are his brothers and sisters, essentially. Nor to many peoples of unintelligible speech or difficult language, whose words you cannot understand. So in other words, Ezekiel said, go back to people you know. These are your fellow countrymen and women. They're smart people. They can understand things. There's not a language barrier. If anybody's going to listen to you, it should be these people. But I have sent you to them who should listen to you. Yet, what are they going to do? The house of Israel will not be willing to listen to you, since they are not willing to listen to me. Surely the whole house of Israel is stubborn and obstinate. Behold, I have made your face as hard as their faces, and your forehead as hard as their foreheads. So what is the scroll? John is being said, take these things in. they're going to be sweet as you seek to understand them and as you are able to embrace it. But you know what? It's going to be bitter. So it's an allusion back to Ezekiel. It's saying, listen, this is why you're not going to write these things down, because nobody's going to listen to you. That means whatever is happening in those 7 thunder peals is so out there that even us as Christians probably wouldn't believe it. That's how I take it. Because, right? Who is John's countryman? Us, Christians. He's a Christian, right?
Oh, okay.
So we would be the ones who would not be of unintelligible speech, who would be in our right minds, and who would reject what he has to say. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I really want to know.
But it's crazy in the context of, I mean, we've just read crazy, bizarre things that have happened. So if this is something that's like, yeah, this is even worse, they won't believe you.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I've tried to wrap my mind around, what could it be?
Yeah.
I have a hard enough time wrapping my mind around Revelation 8 and 9 so far. I don't know.
So house of Israel, what does that refer to?
Well, in Ezekiel, that would be the Israeli people.
Okay.
But John it's the same thing that Ezekiel was told. You eat this book. It's going to be sweet as honey because you're going to love what you have to say, but nobody's going to listen to you when he goes back and tells everybody. And it's the same thing, John. You're going to love what you hear, but nobody's going to believe you. So what is it? I don't know. So sweet in the mouth is like the sovereignty of God, right? God is in control, is whatever he's doing. The bitter in the stomach is this devastating judgment, whatever it might be, and that nobody's going to believe. That's why it's bitter. You ever had like really good news and like you want to share it with somebody, and then everybody you tell is just like, oh, no big deal. You ever feel a little bitter about that? That's kind of how I feel about it. Like you can't wait to tell your spouse something, or your kids, or a friend, or a coworker. You're so excited about. They're just like, okay. I mean, that's the best as I can come up with to help you understand that.
Or could it also mean, you ever had it where you get sick to your stomach because you got to give people bad news?
Well, it could be that too.
You know, because he knows the end result, but to tell people, it's as bad as it is now, it's going to get a lot worse.
Yep. Oh yeah. Revelation 10:11, and then they said to me, you must prophesy, and again concerning many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. So basically John's being said, you're going to have to tell people about, Revelation, right? He's writing all these other things down. He's going to have to tell people about it. But whatever he's going to tell them about that's going to be too bitter to speak. The little book essentially contains the rest of the book of Revelation, or those 7 peals, essentially, is the idea of looking at it from that perspective of what we're going to see. What we've kind of been looking at here is in this timeline, we have the seals in Revelation 6, we have the interlude in 7, the trumpet judgments in 8 and 9. We're going to see what takes place of Israel in Revelation 12. And then 13, we're going to have the beast who's going to come on the scene, the false prophet. Then we're going to have a prelude to war as we're marching, as there is some globalization happening, but not everybody's a fan of that because humanity will continue to war. It will lead to the war of Geddon. And that's kind of where we're headed here. And we're in Revelation chapter 10 at the moment, and we're seeing that preparation because in Revelation 11, we will see the 2 witnesses will come on the scene, and the 7th trumpet will be blown and opened. Is where we're going, and so we're at about the halfway point.
Is the 2 witnesses the ones that I read about here recently and left behind? The ones that come to the Wailing Wall?
Probably, yeah.
Moses and Ezekiel? Or Elijah, I'm sorry.
And as we will say, we don't know who these people are. They're just 2 witnesses.
Right, I know.
So okay, so like I said, this 10th chapter was pretty short, or at least what we're covering today of it. Questions? We have time. We got 5 minutes. What do you want to talk about? Let's use the time.
So when God is revealing to John what to write here, he's telling him to write and present this writing. I'm confused as to the people he was writing to, that they were to understand a futuristic
He was,
Concept
remember,
today?
who's he writing to?
Oh, it's Christians.
He's writing to those 7 churches we saw in Revelation 2 and 3
Yeah.
in modern day Turkey. So, for whatever reason, they are not meant to know those 7 peals, those 7 thunders,
Yes.
but the rest of it is okay. And by default, we're not meant to know the 7 thunders as well.
I was gonna say, yeah, but it's carried from then, even clear to today, and it still hasn't been fulfilled, so,
Well, none of this has been fulfilled
Yeah.
other than through chapter 3.
okay. So we
Yvonne.
sit around with the mystery.
So during all of this, where are the believers? Are we going back and forth? And are we on earth and God is protecting us?
So that is the mystery, isn't it? A little bit. So we talked a little bit about that last week. Were you there last week, Yvonne?
Yeah, but I listened to it. So
You listened to it, okay.
Unfortunately, I like being in class.
Yeah, we talked about the rapture a little bit, right? We talked about how the church is not mentioned at all in Revelation chapter 4 all the way until chapter 19. So it's just like they disappear. Yet they're mentioned like dozens and dozens of times in 1, 2, and 3. And so in this class, we're taking the idea of a pre-tribulation rapture view. In other words, the church is gone. It's been removed. Is there something in Revelation that says this is when it happens? No. But we're kind of defaulting to the idea of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, which talks about that. And there'd be something in 2 Corinthians, no, 1st or 2nd? In Corinthians somewhere, I'm drawing a blank, that talks about being changed in the twinkling of an eye. And we would say that's the rapture. And also, if you go to Revelation chapter 3, God says, I will spare you from the wrath, speaking to those churches. And as we looked at Revelation chapter 3, those letters follow this pattern where there's very specific to the church, and then there's a promise that seems to be for all Christians of all time. And so we kind of take that as the idea that the church is no longer, it's been removed. Did I answer your question, Yvonne, before I move on to Dave? Now, let's say there is no rapture. Okay? Then you would be hard pressed to say there's protection, because we just read in Revelation chapter 9 that the only people, and I mean the only ones, who are protected from the demonic armies was the 144,000 Jews. So, something to think about. Which is, I think, a really good argument for the church is no longer there at the moment. But there are people getting saved, so to speak, but they're being martyred and they're dying and going to be with Christ. Okay, Dave, your question.
When it says here in Revelation 10:11, and it said, and they said to me, when it said, before it was a single, I thought an angel was talking to John, right, Christ,
Yeah.
and then it says they. Revelation 10:11, and they said to me.
Well, that's why we should use the ESV. And I was told you must again prophesy about many peoples and nations and languages and kings. How's that for an answer?
Okay, well, I'm just going by the book.
I know, and I forget, what does he use? Is he use the New King James?
I don't know.
Or does he use the NASB? I think it's one of those two.
He's
Well-
the NASB.
NASB, okay, thank you.
Well, so
So,
that, I just read that and it's like, okay, when I looked at something else, it was different. Okay.
Mine's
It just,
NASB.
yeah, so it is interesting because you're exactly right. So let's say that there is some reason, because the NASB translates it in the plural, obviously.
Right.
But as you look through this, you have singular,
yeah, that's what,
and then it would change to plural. Nope. Now I'm drawing a blank. How do I get to my NASB 9 to 5? Yeah, open. Well, come on. Well, it won't open for some reason.
You have to click the start. Is that what it says?
Isn't it?
That says shut. I don't know, whatever's blue.
Save?
Oh.
no? Okay, it's just a.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, I forgot. Let's try to do a parallel. Now we can see it side by side. Let's close you out. No, it's not locked, but that's okay. So 11, 11, and they said to me, and I was told. So, yeah, there's a difference. But if we go back up, in verse 9, oops,
And it says, and he said to me.
yeah.
So it's just a different translation. That's what was throwing me off when it said, they. Okay, I didn't, I was just thinking there was
Well,
only.
he said it like the voice of the seven thunder peals, so it's, I think it's just referring to the plural of the seven.
Well, I like where you're going with that. So John gave us a hint. There's multiple people involved with those 7 peals.
Ooh.
Huh? Is that where you're going with it?
That's
Okay.
how I understand it. Like, maybe
It could just be a textual variant. Sometimes, there might be one Greek letter that would change it from plural to singular, and that could just be a textual variant that the NASB 95 picks up on, and the ESV says this couldn't be, so we'll smooth it out. I don't know. Let's close in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, the things we've read this morning seem just unimaginable. They seem too amazing to even wrap our minds around. But my prayer is that as we don't focus too much on this, because at the end of the day, you're sovereign, you're in control, and your focus is to be on you. And to realize that what you're going to do in the future is the best course of action. And we will choose to trust you through this. There are other things in the Bible that seem too hard to believe or difficult to believe because we don't want that to be the way, but we also know this is a sin-cursed world, a very sinful world, more so than we can even possibly imagine. Here in America, we sometimes think that life is mostly good with just a little bit of bad mixed in, but the reality is this is a sinful world and it's mostly bad and is in deep need of being fixed. And the things that we're reading are the steps you're taking to fix it. And eventually it'll result in a new heaven and a new earth where sin will no longer exist. And we will say that you are good and everything that we can see is good because it's been made by you. May we focus on those things, and I pray this in Jesus' name.